questions. You're gonna have to excuse me as I sift through here. One that So this is another, somewhat humorous one. Some of them are a little darker, so I don't want to. But this is maybe a year later, beginning of 2007, end of 2006, during one such closure, when we were trying to enter Gaza and the border was closed for about 3 weeks, and we were in El-Arish, this town very close to Gaza. Waiting to enter, waiting for the border to open. And my son was about 2.5, and so it was this time where they become a little bit more cognizant of their surroundings, and he begins to ask me all these questions about why the border is closed. And so it's called What Do I Tell a 2-Year-Old? And the conversation was in Arabic, but it's translated here into English. He keeps asking me about the border. Yusuf, I mean. He overhears things. Ma'bar this and ma'bar that. Ma'bar is the word we used to refer to the crossing. And so naturally inquisitive, he asks what we are doing here, what we are doing, and why we are still here, and each question is followed by another and another. Yusuf, Mama, can I ask you something? Yes, anything, my love. Why are we still here in Arish? Well, because we're waiting to enter Gaza, dear. But then why don't we go to Gaza? Because the Ma'bad is closed, my love. Why is it still closed? Silence. Mommy, why is it still closed? I don't know, I don't know. I know, my dear, but do you really want to know? Do you really need to know? Well, who's closing it, Mommy? What do I tell him? Some bad people, I say. You mean like in the stories, like Shere Khan in the Jungle Book? Yeah, I guess, something like that. But who are they? Who are these bad people? Is it the Yahud, he asks, the Jews, mimicking what he's heard on the border? What do I say? I hesitate. Look, they're people just like people everywhere, and some of them are good and some of them are bad. And there's bad people closing the border. But why? What did we do? I wish I knew, my dear. I wish I had all the answers so I could answer all your questions, and I wish I didn't have to answer such questions to start with, but now I do, and what do I say to you? Mommy, please tell them to open it. I tried, Habibi. Wallah, I tried. Try harder. Try again, and this time tell them Yusuf wants to enter Gaza. Maybe they'll listen. And so here it goes. Dear Mr. Peretz, this is Amir Peretz, the Israeli defense minister at the time. My son Yusuf, 2 years and 9 months, would like me to inform you that he wants to enter Gaza. He asked me to tell whoever it is who is keeping it closed to open the border for him immediately. In fact, he asks me every day, and now asking is no longer sufficient. He wants answers, too. Who is keeping the border closed? Why is it still closed, and who is keeping it closed and why? So in addition to asking you to open the border, I'm also writing to ask you what I can tell a 2-year-old to satisfy his insatiable curiosity. What can I tell him of borders and occupation and oppression and collective punishment? What would you tell him? Lying doesn't work. 2-year-olds are like natural-born lie detectors. And so he figures it's the bad guy, like in the stories we all read growing up. And now he demands to know who the bad guy is. What do I tell a 2-year-old, Mr. Peretz, about the bad guy who won't let him return home? A Palestinian mother. And actually, Gideon Levy, Israeli, well-known Israeli journalist, I think I had emailed him at the time, asking him, see if anyone can cover what was going on. And he wrote about this. And another Israeli journalist, friend of mine who's in Tel Aviv, actually hand-delivered the letter to Amir Peretz. Not that it did much difference, but it always amazed me kind of how small little ripples, would really get around and sometimes make waves. And you always felt like, in that way, you were doing your part, whatever small part that was, to be able to inform the world, at least, about what was going on. At times like this, when you just were enraged that, this was happening and time kind of stands still and nobody really knows what's going on. People are just waiting to go back to their lives. But they can't even do that. Now this is a few years later, 2008, when I had gone back to the United States and then I wasn't able to go back to Gaza. and it was after the, I'm sorry, I'm not, usually when I do a full presentation I have my PowerPoint and I go in detail, I talk about the elections and the disengagement and all of that. But this would be after the elections by about 2 years. It was end of 2008. In fact, it was just a couple of days before Cast Lead. It was a very dark time in Gaza. And my parents were there, I was not. But I mean, things were getting worse by the day. It was really awful. I mean, people hadn't been able to leave or enter for, about 2 years. I mean, it was one of the lowest points of the siege. So this was written when at that time, I used to live in North Carolina, in the conversation I had with my father, as in one of many conversations. And it's in the details. We celebrated Eid al-Adha last week with my brother. That's the Muslim festival of the sacrifice. We made a 7-layer chocolate cake and decorated it to look like the Kaaba, around which the kids circulated 7 times, as though performing the tawaf in Hajj. The children got a kick out of this gastronomical pilgrimage. As usual, I Skyped my father to wish him glad tidings and to hear of the death of his cousin, the one who always sat on the street in front of Khamis's store, sipping sparkling water in the green bottles from Egypt. The funeral coincided with Eid, so my father's scraggly, awkward stubble of a beard, which he was growing in anticipation of the holiday following the prophetic tradition, could have easily been mistaken as a sign of respect in the incidence of a close family member's death. The news seemed to get darker by the day. At first they were happy losing electricity for 4 hours a day, then 8, 12, and 15 hours. And now they are going for 18 to 20 hours of outages at a time. They have a generator, purchased from the tunnel grey markets in Rafah, says my mother. It's giving them some problems, so they sent it to be fixed by a local mechanic. They fix anything there. Old microwaves, broken toasters, laptops, digital cameras, blenders. Most learn during their days as laborers in Israel. In addition to the generator, they share a line with our neighbors, the ones who own a famous Gaza boutique, who are originally from Nablus, 5 brothers. They are on a different grid, so the outages are at different times, and vice versa. We're Skyping less and less these days. When the electricity is on, my father takes the opportunity to log on and let me know when he can talk. Sometimes he logs on with the generator, but then we can only use audio and for a limited time. So how are things? I ask non-facetiously. Well, we got a bird, he says. What? A hassoon. You know, they're quite rare these days. Doesn't he get cold? I ask. You're just like your mom. She asked the same question. Birds don't get cold. How do you think he survives in the wild? But anyway, I cover him at night and put him on the balcony during the day. But he's not in the wild. Anyway, where did you get him? The guy who takes care of your mom's land in Mawasi. He likes to catch quails and he caught this hassoon, so I bought it from him. He gave us cauliflower and cabbage from the land, chimes in my mother. She rambled on about the land and the man who is taking care of the land and the condition it's in and what's growing there and what the plans are for it, or lack thereof, details that now escape me. The land used to be my grandfather's and it's very sentimental to her. The details seem boring, but they're what keep them going, what keep us all going. You see, trying to find a way to keep up with the boring details, to manage them, keeps alive the illusion of normalcy. It's some kind of anesthetic, I suppose. It keeps the hope afloat that the dawn is near, even if near is actually not so near at all. All right, maybe I can do one more. And this was, you know, in the middle of, this is a few days after that conversation, in the middle of Cast Lead. You know, and again, in one of these many conversations we had during the limited time that their electricity was on. And, you know, it was a very hard time, obviously, for them because, you know, you're already besieged and you're being bombarded and there's nowhere to run, but it's all in the dark. Can
you say what Cast Lead was? You've mentioned it a number of times.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So this was, in the end, December of 2008, Israel launched an assault that it had actually been preparing for more than 6 months, at the admission of many Israeli generals, against Gaza to kind of, you know, in their vernacular, serve as a deterrent to kind of punish Gaza, deter them from revolting against the status quo, which was basically, you know, after the disengagement, we're going to, you know, close you off from the world. we're going to besiege you, you're going to have, you know, your question of freedom it's never a question of freedom, should never be brought up, but you have to accept this. You can't revolt or rebel or demand more freedoms or demand that you're able to, you know, travel or study or visit the West Bank, and if you do, this is the result. You're going to be punished for it. So it was, again, this punishment for rejecting that status quo. And what they formally called it was cast lead, which was this, obviously this euphemism referring to this very joyous and innocent Jewish poem about a dreidel cast lead. And, you know, Palestinians referred to it as the assault on Gaza. And it was unprecedented in terms of the amount of firepower that was used, in terms of the intentional targeting of civilians, civilian infrastructure, agricultural infrastructure. A fourth of what was completely destroyed was actually agricultural infrastructure, colleges. Half of Gaza's farmland was destroyed. So it really took a very heavy toll. 1,400 Palestinians were killed, a third of them children and civilians. But more than that, again, it was this very systematic effort to target civilian infrastructure, to punish the civilian population, to destroy the judicial infrastructure, the government infrastructure. That was the first thing that was targeted, were like prisons and government infrastructure, then schools and so on and so forth. And again, just the scale of destruction was unprecedented, especially considering that it was against an unarmed civilian population, 80% of whom are refugees, and that are stateless. That's really what was, and I think it was the UN rapporteur at the time, Jean Dugard, said it was unprecedented in modern history, and many people at the time compared it to the Warsaw Ghetto. So that's cast lead for those who are unfamiliar. And again, it was in the middle of some of the the worst points of the blockade that was already going on in Gaza. This, you know, came at the cusp of that. So, does that answer the question?